Okay, so I wanted to talk about something that happened in tech over the last week, and there was this. It's called Project Greenlight, and it's by Google. And honestly, it's by Google. Yes. So it didn't get announced. It was announced before, but I think they got the green light to funny green light. They got the thumbs up to like go ahead with it, and it's going to start implementation in the US. So what is I have been thinking about this idea for so long and why it hasn't been done yet, but now it's officially being done. So Project Greenlight is it's part of the Google Research Initiative, and they're going to use Google Maps data and give it to AI to optimize traffic patterns.
Traffic time.
Yeah, so they're going to start. So it's going to be fed directly into like Department of Infrastructure in the US, so that like routes and like traffic lights will essentially be run by. Well, it will use the Google Maps data to optimize routes and traffic times and like the lights and everything.
It'll obviously be working where the majority of drivers, if they're going in one direction, they'll optimize the green lights to go with them.
Exactly. And that's essentially that. It's a very simple implementation. Like the solution they're trying to solve is just doing that, but the implementation is probably going to be a little bit difficult. But like, it's very doable. It's very realistic, and I think.
I mean, that goes hand in hand with what Audi has at the moment.
What is it?
Where the new cars have a red lights detection. So they will tell you at what speed to travel to hit every single green light.
Really?
Yeah. And then if you're parked at a...
Wait, how do they know?
No one's been able to really be able to explain it from what I've seen. But I think they use the technology to communicate with the traffic light equipment. Because if you're at a red light, your dash will count down how many seconds until it goes green.
Yeah.
And it'll stop counting up until the 5 seconds. So obviously, you're not going to be drag racing anybody. You're going to know exactly.
Sure.
But 5 seconds before the light turns green,
it'll stop.
The time will disappear.
Ah.
And then it'll tell you essentially at what speed to go to hit every single green light.
Wow.
So if they work together, then obviously you'd have the interface onto the cars to tell them at what speed to travel and obviously all of that.
Yeah.
But then optimize the green lights from the actual infrastructure.
Yeah, because I think so far, obviously Google's still had this data and they already, calculate routes based on traffic and like people's density. But I think why this is different is it actually interfaces with the actual traffic lights itself, so you can control traffic flow better. And I just think as an engineer and I would love to get that data and just imagine that control of a.
I think you can get access to the Google Map APIs and you can do different things.
But not personal locations, right?
Oh yeah, correct. But it's about accessibility of the data.
Exactly.
But again, if it's only, then if Google controls all the traffic lights, what will happen then?
Yeah,
it's a little bit scary though.
If Google gets hacked, then
Google gets hacked.
I think we've gone past scary. Every week there's a new thing that's scary.
It's like Optus shut down yesterday.
Yes, that was interesting.
That was horrible.
Did you get affected?
Oh yeah, both SIM cards.
But you have two.
So I've got two SIM cards. Both went down.
Really?
It was 5-6 hours. I think.
Yeah.
I woke up yesterday. Was it yesterday? No, it was
the day before.
Day before yesterday.
I woke up in the morning with no electricity because they were changing our electricity meter, but nobody told me because my parents are in India right now, and I woke up and there's no electricity, and I'm late for work, so I'm trying to get out of the house really quickly. So I had to manually unlock the garage and then slide it up, but it was just and then I had to just leave and close it, so it was open. Anyone could just go and pull it open. But so I was it's fine. I'll just call my sister and tell her to lock it again. And then I'm driving, why is there no range? and then so I had no Wi-Fi, no range the whole day. Couldn't talk to anyone. If something got stolen, I could have probably sued up and asked.
No, this is huge. And it's funny. It's not actually funny because what type of insurance will cover that?
I think any.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think.
Optus insurance would cover it.
Imagine if Optus is actually offering data as a compensation to the
200
people.
gigs to
really
postpaid customers.
Yeah.
And then prepaid customers that are with Optus get unlimited on weekends until the end of the year. But then, only weekends.
Yeah.
And then I got a SMS just before from a Sim, which uses Optus network, to say we're going to top you up by 60 gigs.
Oh,
wow.
I mean, look, who
It
runs
doesn't
out of
make
data nowadays?
Honestly, like,
Correct,
you've got
I mean-
internet at home that's unlimited most of the
Yeah.
times. At work, it's just more that inconvenience where for 6-7 hours,
Yeah.
you
But it
couldn't-
wasn't the data that was the problem.
No, it was the actual connectivity
It was
of
the
it.
connectivity.
Yeah,
But there was no accessibility to.
it was no access whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
So the question here is that if you're becoming super smart and you can't sustain these systems, then suddenly a disruption will.
Yeah, it's true. It's always the simplest things that kind of like.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the issue with a lot of things nowadays, especially with how advanced technology has gotten, is what we as a community, and especially anyone that specializes in any industries, engineers as such, they have such aspirational goals, but it's the equipment and the
Yes.
infrastructure that limits them from meeting those things. So it's, say for example, Australia. We're a developed country, but in terms of ranking for our connectivity and our internet reliability and speeds, we're probably, I think we're like 20 something or 30 something
Yeah.
in the rankings. Whereas, I forgot what country it was, but it's less developed in terms of Australia, but they're third.
Yeah,
No.
right. And it's ironic because Wi-Fi was invented in Australia. Exactly.
Yeah. It's ironic, yeah.
But it speaks to like infrastructure and government and upgrades and the
Exactly.
time it takes. So
Because I think there was something that it was quite controversial years and years ago, like towards 2009 or 10, where the government had two options in front of them.
yeah,
One was to implement something I think that like one other country was using, and the other was NBN. And this was going to be the cheaper option because
Yeah.
it was already fully developed. They worked on the research. It was just buy the equipment, implement it. Whereas NBN was develop your own infrastructure. All that.
yes,
They decided, no, we want to keep it in-house. Let's go NBN. It went 10 times over in value, I believe, in terms of cost. And the actual benefits the customers were getting were 10 times less.
yes, absolutely.
So it just made no
And,
sense.
and to make things worse, like maybe even less than 5 years after NBN got released, they released 5G, which is
Exactly.
10 times faster.
Yeah.
And so billions of dollars spent on NBN infrastructure.
And then 5G.
And like as soon as my area gets 5G, we're switching. Like it's almost the same price, maybe a little bit more, but like it's insanely quick.
And the funny thing with that is you don't have to have a whole connection of wires. It's just build a tower near the houses,
Exactly.
and then it directly spreads that 5G.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people are going to be scared that 5G is going to, you know.
Cause cancer.
Yeah,
It's the whole misconception of it all, but you know. It's,
Yeah, no, anyway.
I do want to get back to what. You know what? You're being really quiet. So what do you think of? You're really analyzing this,
I think it's
Sitting there absorbing information.
absorbing us. You know, like.
rolling it through.
it's all about mate.
Oh yeah.
I think it goes back to the point, right? It's like there are these innovations and these solutions, but it's like at the fundamental question is, you know.
We're gonna have a lot of editing, man. It's fun. It's fun.
I
It's
think
good.
No, the fundamental thing is like, what are you trying to solve? You know.
Why are you laughing? Excuse me, I started laughing.
One thing that we could sort of go off with that is, again, it goes to the benefit that at the end of the day, we're the ultimate users. So what are we paying and what are we getting?
Sure.
Because you look at it, the cost of these services,
There is a story.
the cost of these services are still astronomically high.
Yeah.
If you think about it, especially
compared to other countries.
exactly,
Yeah.
like you could go to South Korea. They've got, I think, the second fastest or the fastest infrastructure in terms of connectivity and their internet speeds and whatnot and reliability, and they pay next to nothing. Whereas here, for example, I pay $100 for unlimited internet, 100 megabytes download, but off-peak hours I'm getting about 60. And then the reliability of it is it cuts out every now and then. So I'm sitting on hold with what Telstra's typically known for is you sit there on hold for 2-3 hours, you call them up, and then we had a great relationship with them where every time we'd call them up, like, oh, we'll send you a new modem. Just to fix it. Because they were thinking the modem's the issue. So then at one stage we had 12 Telstra modems sitting at home.
No.
I kid you not. Like we had a cupboard full of Telstra modems, all identical, and it was just because my dad was, he had a bit of a habit where he would just yell at them. Like, this is ridiculous, I'm paying these prices, you need to fix it. And then, probably it's the next ethnic thing, but they sent a new modem, and then it doesn't fix anything. So now, when I think about it, because now I'm the one paying for the internet, I'm like, cost of living's going up.
Yeah.
The cost of everything's ridiculous, but I'm still not getting my money's worth.
Right.
And now I'm trying to get a house, and it's just, I'm like, all right, so I'm not getting the benefit of the internet. I'm not getting the benefit of, like, there's so many things in this day and age where you're paying, but you're not getting what you're paying for.
Yeah.
And the prices keep going up.
Yes.
And then also you look at the correlation between, all right, these expenditures and then like house prices.
Yeah, it's pretty
So
crazy.
it's like, well, what the hell do I do?
Can I admit something? I've actually never been, like, I'm also looking for a house, but I've never actually been to an auction before.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So my parents bought my house, like the house we live in now, like when I was like really young, probably like 8 or 9, and I wasn't there in the auction. I don't remember.
Yeah.
And ever since then, they haven't looked to buy another house. Their number one priority was just to pay off the mortgage, and now they're done with that, and they're not looking to buy more houses. They're just looking to like just enjoy, have fun.
Yeah.
They see all their family friends buying houses and how stressed out they are, and they're just like, nah, I'm good.
No, I mean, that's a good approach, I think. I have more reasons. I mean, I just want to jump back on something that you guys were mentioning about the ABN, NBN network and the infrastructure. I just have a scenario. Imagine that we were getting all these technologies, which is updated technologies and all of that, and we were adopting that into the entire society. And if they were disrupted, who was there to fix these things?
I mean, engineers.
But do we have enough of them?
Yeah, sure.
Because because at the end of the day, it's also about how much society values these things.
Yeah.
In the hierarchical, because the more value the society puts into something, it attracts more people because its resources require.
I mean, look, are they engineers though that are fixing it? Is it technicians?
I think it's
It is technicians.
It's some sort of engineering mindset, though.
But-
so if you're a technician or
I think it goes back to like a root problem, right? Like you've got like two players right here. You've got Optus and you've got Telstra, who have basically like duopoly over the market.
yeah,
And so Optus and Telstra, they don't really have to innovate. They just have to do the bare minimum. They're like complacent. They're lazy. And so I think what the solution is that you need more competitors, because you got Vodafone, you got Amazon, and all of these tier 2 companies, telco companies, who hire the services of Optus and Telstra, And so the root problem is, and the thing is, Optus actually one of the primary. No, one of the
You're gonna tell us why you're laughing because you want to laugh as well. I want to laugh as well, man.
I'm not gonna laugh.
This is the way that we're looking.
Don't look at that.
He's got all eyes on him, so he's just like, fucking.
Who the heck do I look at, man? But I was reading on the news. It was. I was reading on the news, mate, and it was apparently the cause of the problem was that Optus was actually outsourcing.
To what?
Outsourcing their technicians, so they're reducing the number of the workforce.
When you say outsourcing still Australian technicians in.
No, but they were reducing
Contractors.
the total number of the workforce.
Okay.
So that one person could do the work of like 3 or 4, and so even with that they outsource it. Because infrastructure is not just about like visiting the actual site. It's the engineering behind it, the support services that go behind it. It's not just the technician that does everything. Someone has to support that technician.
Field service engineers.
So those kind of things, those that labor was outsourced to countries like India and the Philippines and Malaysia.
So when you say outsource the country, yes, that's a major issue.
offshoring essentially,
Yeah.
going to another country, and so that was one of the major reasons why Optus suffered this problem, because the right people weren't there.
Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, getting to, because you're just confirming my point that I was telling, because Optus does that because they need to make profit.
Yeah.
Who is the customer of those products?
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
Is a society, and the society
Yeah.
is not willing to pay that money.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you're saying we should pay more money?
no, it's a multidimensional issue,
Right.
because let's not talk about the solution, because the solution is much more complex and it's
Yeah.
just one person is. But let's lay out the issue here,
Yeah,
because
okay.
it's, if we want to talk about the housing, it's somehow related to the housing as well, because it's about the shortage of the labor skill
Yeah.
and how we manage to actually get to the market and how the society values these things, okay, to make Australian, to build Australian, to use Australian products, okay?
Yeah.
And it's directly connect to the sovereign capabilities that we need to build here, okay?
But again, it goes back to like, we're a capitalistic nation, right? Like, our companies, they are there to make a profit.
Yeah,
so,
correct.
So even though they have like a monopoly and whatnot, what incentivizes them to innovate and really push for it? Like, because it's Telstra and Optus. That's the thing. There is no other competitors. They own all the infrastructure, and so for Optus to really to improve their if processes, systems and infrastructure, all of these things, there has to be more competition.
Do you
Competition, innovation is strongly correlated with competition.
Yes.
The more competitive and in danger you feel, and the less profit margins you have. Because I was reading a book the other day about this kind of this topic, and essentially the more competition you have, the more likely it is that you're likely to innovate.
Yes.
But when it's like it's you and Telstra, you don't feel that there is no incentive. Because the thing is, regardless of what you do or don't, if you maintain if you do the bare minimum, people are still going to use it.
Yes.
Because who else are they going to go to? But if there's a lot of competition, then it's not necessarily the case. And
Do you think Starlink, they're scared of it a little bit?
Starlink.
Like Tesla's Starlink?
I
I'm
think
sorry, Elon Musk's Starlink?
I don't think so, because I'm not sure if you've read. I think correct me if I'm wrong, but Clayton Christensen's book, the disruptors or disruption technologies, is that when a new technology is coming along, they're not big companies are like, oh, it's a small thing, don't worry about it. They feel comfortable. They're in their comfort zones. They're like, how can possibly a small electric company, Tesla, overtake us? We've dominated the market.
Yeah.
So look back in the rear mirror and see, okay, this is what has been and what will be.
Yes.
And they lose sight of that essentially, of what is possible and how the future, what tomorrow won't look like, what it looks like today. So I think the same philosophy goes, because it's been proved multiple times. Apple with a PC.
Yeah.
Apple with a PC. IBM dominated the market.
Yeah.
They didn't care about Apple. They're like, oh, these are small kids,
Yes.
playing around. It's a niche thing.
Yeah.
But then it goes through the S curves and it reaches a certain point in which then it becomes mainstream.
Yeah.
Microsoft, the same thing. Amazon,
Or even iPhone and BlackBerry.
iPhone, exactly.
Yeah.
And so.
But to your point, if it was a real capitalism
Yeah.
that could create equal opportunities for the innovators and public awareness, then it's not really a bad thing.
Yeah.
But because it creates that disruptions that even bigger companies, because then you make the consumers aware that the technology is moving, and and the consumers will like, okay, this technology is really cool, I want to invest in it.
Yeah.
Because they have seen, I mean, my generation at least have seen how Apple started and get to this point, how Microsoft started and got to this point, and all these smaller startups suddenly jumped up, So I think the society will become aware of that, how they flow the money. Because the other thing is, what decisions these companies make, like Telstra or any other, Optus or all of that, is also about how they represent them in the share market. So it's a market psychology, that how people react to those decisions, defines the value. So if the society defines the value, and say, this is a new technology, we are interested in it, we're going to shoot. Like ChatGPT, for instance, Microsoft forced to buy it. I don't think Microsoft was interested to, invest into Chat.
Yeah.
But the market, like, they got so much traction from the consumers, like, this is the big new thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
I think the true test of it will be if, for example, if you have Starlink, like what Bijan mentioned, and you have Optus and Telstra, and because of their business model, they're constrained. They have to put a certain price on it, right, in order to be profitable and to be sustainable, right? And if a different technology comes along with a different business model, and the true test of it is which way will consumers go? And I think the way of like Starlink.
Yeah. People do like new things,
Because
but
that's more value. That's
Sure.
And so Optus, if they again, it goes to the point that they don't feel scared, that because they have a monopoly, a dominant market share, and so they don't feel the incentive.
Here's the thing, especially going into the technology company, is again like referring back to the market and having more competition. It always drives more innovation, lower costs.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the biggest problem with telecommunication, especially in Australia, is the infrastructure for it.
yeah,
If a new company comes along, they have to start getting their own towers because otherwise they're going to use Optus's tower. They're going to use Telstra's tower, Vodafone's tower.
Entry to barriers are very high
So
in that situation.
that's why
So is Telstra a government company?
it used to be government,
Then it
that
got
then
private.
went privatized, which is the problem there. Because I feel like, and that's just my opinion, is I feel like the government needs to have some shareholding, 25%, 20 or 25%, enough to influence decisions in those big players.
that situation, you would need 51%.
No,
I think
that's
because
like overall control. But you're saying to have a
to have an
say.
influence
Yeah.
into it, I think is because then obviously you want to keep
I
shareholders.
think they
happy.
do though. That's the thing with Telstra. I think they do have
With Telstra,
a minority
Yeah.
share in the company though.
but not enough to influence massively. And then that's why with Optus, because they don't have any shareholdings, now they've done they've had to force a review onto Optus to see what went wrong.
But do you want to? You can't always have, for example, a government, government entity have a control over, or somewhat of an influence through having a share in the company. You want to do that naturally, right? So the more competition you have, what the government should do should reduce the entry to barriers so that there's more competition in the market. Therefore, you have all of these companies naturally, for the sake of being profitable and being sustainable and staying alive, they do it naturally. They innovate, they use that and reinvest. And so you can't always have a direct entity telling them what to do, because sometimes the government doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, sure. But is it really the government's job to get rid of the monopoly? I mean,
I think it is, because who else is going to do
I
it?
mean,
Because
we
if you
can
have a monopoly,
yeah.
they're not going to want to change. And that's why you have, in so many governments and so many countries, you have lobbying, because they need to protect their interests. And
Yes.
so it's the government's role to create a level playing field so that there is more competition. Because otherwise, who's going to do it? Who has the authority to do
That's
it?
true. I mean, we can speak to OTR, who was,
When they
bought out.
they were trying to sell, but they
but
got
then the government put restrictions on because then they would have created a monopoly. So I think this is something that does happen, but it's harder, I guess, for like Optus and Telstra because they already exist.
Yeah.
You know,
But the thing is, you have companies like, Elon Musk, Starlink, who are creating, the entry to barriers. If you were to go a traditional way of using Optus's infrastructure, forget it. Because at the end of the day, you're paying them, they're going to be in business regardless.
Yeah.
And you might not necessarily be in business. But companies like Starlink, who have their own infrastructure, their own satellites that they can launch, that poses a direct threat to Optus, Telstra, and all of
Absolutely.
the other companies. So Optus, Telstra being tier 1, and you've got all the other tiers.
Yeah.
And so potentially you can, just like what Tesla did to, the
Ford.
I mean,
Toyota,
look.
So I think the same thing is going to happen with
This
the
is-
telecommunications.
But like telecommunications is very simple, though, right? Because as a consumer, the only thing you look for is what's cheapest. So and there's no loyalty, right? There's no the second Starlink becomes like $80 a month,
and
it's over.
Exactly, yeah,
It's
exactly.
Absolutely, it's like right now it's like $130 a month, right? So it's like it's gonna get cheaper though.
Well, I think they've been trying to do incentives for those that aren't able to access Telstra and Optus, or have
Yes.
only access to
Yes.
Telstra and Optus, especially in the Outback. They're doing like $249.
Yeah, for hardware. And,
Yeah,
and,
for the hardware,
absolutely.
and then the plans or whatever.
But
Absolutely.
the question is, what if Optus and Telstra, they see this, so why aren't they doing anything about it, you know?
It's because
But what can they do?
It's
That's
that
not part of their
ignorance.
business model.
Sure, but they're earning so much money.
Yeah.
The profits are in the billions.
Maybe
Surely
what
they
they're-
can put a small research team to come up with a satellite telecommunication.
But they're not going to copy them. Maybe their research, maybe their answer to Starlink is 5G. Maybe their goal is to try to get 5G cheaper than Starlink. 'Cause-
Potentially.
Because you think about it, Telstra and Optus don't know satellites. They know cell towers.
Exactly.
And one thing that's just come into my head is, you know how the Optus outage happened? The broadband, that's NBN.
Yes.
NBN didn't go down.
No.
My Telstra NBN was working.
Yeah.
Vodafone NBN was working. Why was Optus's NBN not working?
Right.
That,
Because I think they had a software update, and
'Cause-
and they sort of burned out the part of the infrastructure, because a lot of phones. So the number of phones that went to iPhone, the newer version of the iPhones, the newer version of phones apparently demanded more resources from their infrastructure,
right.
and they could not keep up with that, and that was part of the issue.
No, but what he's saying is that like Wi-Fi didn't go down, but it's all in the same infrastructure. That's what
Yeah,
you were kind of
so
saying.
So
essentially-
it wasn't because of the network infrastructure.
It was more the validation between...
Validation, yep.
Because obviously, yeah, okay, Optus says, I'm using the NBN,
Yeah.
Yes.
but then I'm going to connect your house to Optus.
Yes.
So then I give you, essentially, this is the, I'd say, essentially, like, say for example, a Telstra modem. Telstra modem has to reflect something onto the Telstra network.
Yes.
For there to be it's like a lock and key.
Yes. 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 That's right.
So I guess in that instance, Optus's lock and key sort of just
Potentially.
was the same.
It wasn't. I think I got an email from work with a potential issue because on the day that it happened, it was like, don't use elevators because emergency
they're-
phones are down.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like, so that's something I would have never thought of. So it's interesting how many
So
different
imagine like
ways
in
that
5 years time you have these surgeries that's gonna be so the doctor is
Yeah.
sitting in Melbourne and the surgery is happening in somewhere out back in
London or
Darwin,
something,
for
yeah.
instance. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they're using these robotic arms and it relies on 5G. Something like this
Yeah.
happen, then what will happen?
it's not good.
Windows
Okay.
updates happen.
Or even worse than that, because let's say a robot helping the doctor doing the surgery, okay, and then you suddenly have your AI having an issue, and it's not helping.
Yeah.
What do you
Like
think
I
is the
guess the
solution to
develop. I guess the developers
do you
just
think-
have to assume,
Look,
make an assumption that it will work. And
I think
have backup
part of
plans.
the problem here. I mean, you mentioned about the investment of government into these giant corporations. It's one solution. But I think the smarter solution is about making the policy more stronger, the standards more public, okay, and make it accessible for everyone, okay. So in that case, look, if you want to access to Australian standards, for instance, it costs.
It's very expensive.
It's
yeah.
very expensive, and it has been a huge discussion about. Instead of government investing into corporations, they need to invest into their standards and policies, make them updated, because that's how they sort of democratize the knowledge and accessibility, which then it actually helps them because there will be more companies
Yeah.
coming into this, and
What sort-
and the flow within the economy will be much more.
Yeah.
Okay.
What sort of policies do you think government, especially in this in this situation, in this scenario?
Putting a cap on, especially, I think one big issue is CEOs and their incentives, and management companies, or the management of the company, because of course at the end of the day, they're geared towards maximizing profits for shareholders, and how do they do that? They charge the consumer and try to, I guess, cut corners everywhere they can, which is why they were outsourcing to Philippines and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then when you look at it, in the last, I think, 15, 20 years, the pay of CEOs. Look at how much that's gone up.
Astronomical.
Yeah.
Close to 10,000%.
Really?
Alan Joyce, I think he
remember
was.
reading somewhere where it was mainly because of McKinsey, one of the consulting companies, where their way to sort of optimize companies and to reduce costs is come in, downsize, lay off a number of people, and then incentivize management to try and focus more, so then increase their pay. That then forces management to keep the consulting company on board, which then maximizes their profits.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons it stops the innovation, because the innovation usually comes from the technical teams.
Wow.
So yeah.
So it's great. That system is great at, like, you know, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't get better. It's
But
just
then it's
crazy.
essentially it's management will stay there. All right, we'll lay off, you know, it's 300, 400 people. We'll save their salaries. Essentially, okay, that boosts our balance sheet.
Yeah.
That makes us look better. And then, all right, then we'll increase prices on the consumer.
Yeah.
Then that maximizes our profits.
Yeah.
Then we'll reinvest that into management and the consulting companies.
Wow.
And then it's an ongoing cycle.
I mean, that's what exactly Elon Musk disrupted that cycle, because he himself, as a technologist, an engineer,
Yeah.
get to the CEO, and he's not getting that much paid
No,
as a CEO, because he's working as a technical person on the plants.
Yeah.
You know, so this is how you disrupt the structure of the companies as well, and that's why he was able to actually disrupt 4 major industries
Yeah.
all at once.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's just a change of the mindset. Because that way that attracts more technical people, more technicians, more engineers into this, which then focusing on the problem and the product and the customer. You know, again, it comes back to the policies.
Yeah.
You know, and how you actually define the structures, and how the system allows you to set up all this. Because I was actually, because the other thing is about the insurance. Okay, the cost of insurance for these companies are huge. So the insurers defines these structures, and I believe for someone like Elon Musk, or even Jeff Bezos, you know, somehow, and Bill Gates, how they overcome that challenge to convince the insurers that they have to change the structure of the companies, okay, to overcome, because if the insurers are not, you know, happy with you, the lenders will not give you the money.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's a circle
And
of
you're
the
a high
systems.
risk because you're not covered.
You're a high risk because you're not covered. Okay, and at the same time with the customers, because if you're not insured, you
Something
don't have
goes wrong.
Is this like
you-
liability insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Public liability.
So if
insurance,
they're
liability, indemnity, and all that.
so if Optus's network shutting down had an impact where someone died or something like that, then obviously they're liable for it.
Yeah.
So
And their insurance has to cover that.
And there is
Yeah,
a
wow.
huge debate now that's starting, because what if it was happening? I mean, they haven't done it, you know, thorough, you know, investigations, because that what actually happened to some of the people, because not everyone came across and said, I had this and this happened to me. Someone has really impacted them, probably is in the hospital somewhere. Okay, so now the debate is actually huge. That's why the parliament has an inquiry. You know, it's like we are going towards a technology-based society, or we try to promote it without actually understanding the challenges.
Yeah.
And the broader society so far is just the consumers of this technology so
But
far.
like, I think it goes back to what you were saying before. It's an infrastructure problem. Like, I think people, like even governments and universities, it's like as soon as we talk about, oh, we need more technology, we need more engineers, they go straight to software.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
They
it's
don't
like,
upgrade the fundamentals.
No, exactly.
It's like you have the foundations for a one-story house, but then you're building 4 stories.
Yeah.
So it's literally like the concrete will
Yeah.
collapse underneath itself.
Exactly. Yeah.
But who's going to build those?
No. And who's gonna pay for it?
And who's going to build those infrastructure
Well, that's
and maintain it?
that's where you put a cap on management profits. So you know, CEOs don't get paid $30 million.
Oh man, I don't
doing
want
nothing.
CEOs come after me.
I feel like you pay them. There has to be some sort of. There has to be obviously a benefit for them, because of the effort they're putting in,
Yeah.
but it can't be exorbitant.
Sure.
Like,
But look, okay, this is really interesting. This is a very, very interesting point because it goes to the psychology of CEOs and successful people.
of course.
Like I was reading How to Build a Car by Adrian Newey. How to Build a Race Car. Very interesting book, and he talks a lot about salary, right? Like, and I think the way he talks about it is very interesting and very similar to, I'm guessing, a lot of CEOs and successful people where like your work is essentially your whole life. Like that overtakes your life and why you do it. And like the money that you get paid to do that, after a certain point, it no longer matters. It's not actually the value of the money that's important. It's how your number compares to other people's numbers, right? So it's like the problem with, so it's like he wanted to get paid more than the CTO of the competing Formula One team, for example. It doesn't actually matter about the money. There's only so much you can do with that money anyway.
Status.
It's just a status. So if you put a cap on the money amount,
But think about if it's a universal coverage. So it's not just one industry. If you universally
yes,
set, it's like, say for example, you look at, and it's a bad example, but you look at like year 12 exams. The max you can get is 99.95. You can't get 100. So,
sure, okay.
And that's where it's, I think, in terms of any industry, for a public company,
Yeah,
you put a max
yeah, sure.
thing. So it's like, all right, if you want to
But
get
we are
your
not a
max,
communist country.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I was gonna say.
So that practice in Soviet Union is in China.
But
Okay,
then-
and China in 1970s and 1980s suddenly changed that law, okay, and that they jumped, okay, and that's where I'm coming in and it's like you cannot force people because then somehow it's just manipulate the system.
Yeah.
Okay, but what if you create an incentive and create a public, not in the company's policies and all
public
that,
policy.
a public policy that and create more available information to run a company so for innovators to come up front and start a business if they have an idea and if they have a solution, okay, and they go through the journey. So because it becomes a natural way. At some point, if the CEO is making too much money, okay, the company will not make that much money then, okay, because then the value of that is defined by the market and how much the product is actually buying from the market. So it becomes a natural sort of process rather than actually forcing it from, from
And
the top. And at some point, if all the other companies understand the value propositions of how to set up values within the companies, okay, and the public as well. Like if you at the end of the day you're gonna have different sizes of the companies. You're gonna have corporations. You're gonna have middle tier. You're gonna have second tier, and on. So for a society to run, you have all these sizes of the companies, but there will be less gap between them, I believe.
And with the CEO, sorry, before quickly, like it's that number of what they're getting paid is obviously not, they don't just come up with that. That's a board discussion.
Exactly.
That everyone comes up with, and they also all of them get paid different amounts, and they all have to agree on it as well. And then that's also that goes in the AGM, and then like all the shareholders also talk about it. Everyone has to agree on this, but it's just that everyone, like if a company does well, it's not just the CEO that makes money. Everyone proportional to how much equity they have in the company, both in your stock, but also in your time and responsibility and risk. They get paid proportionally to that, and the highest person there is usually the CEO.
But then you look at the CEO gets paid in shares as well. So obviously their influence on it increases over time. And then again, I guess to sort of change it up a little bit in terms of to make it fair, obviously, for them to earn, I think really like the government needs to then go to a company and say, look, get honest feedback, get collective feedback from your consumers. If they're satisfied with what you're providing, by all means, you don't need to then invest into research and development and sort of stay stagnant there for now. But then I feel like if they do something like that, where if the consumers come back and say, okay, we actually don't think it's fast enough, or we don't think the service is good, then the government says you then need to, from your revenue, cut your profits and invest in development and invest in research.
I think I go back to like mindset, you know, always. And in my personal opinion, is like there's a good maxim that goes. I think it's called Goodhart's law. It's like when a measure in itself becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure. So, for example, there was
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
So when a measure in itself becomes a target,
Okay.
it ceases to be a good measure. So I'll demonstrate this through an example, and
Sure.
it comes back to a point I want to make, you know. So in India, you know, the government, there was a lot of snakes, there was a lot of cobras, you know, roaming around the streets and whatnot, and the government was like, what do we do? So they're like, okay, we'll incentivize people we'll pay them financially for every head of cobra that they bring, you know, we'll pay them. And in this situation, then that will, you know, reduce the number of cobras in the streets. And it's a win-win situation, right? We've solved the problem.
Sure.
And what happened is that, and a good Goodhart's law kicked in, right? It's like when a measure in itself becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And so what do people do? So initially they saw the number of cobras, you know, go down, you know? But what did happen is that when you focus on one variable as a means of your success and measuring success, people optimize that at other costs. So what happened? People were breeding cobras in their homes, then
Taking the heads.
and once they got, like, once it was like grown up and whatnot, they took their heads off, went to the government, and so they saw, you know, instead of like that, it went up the number of cobras. They're like, what the heck is this? And so it goes back to the point that whenever you're measuring success, it's never good, and it's never a good idea to use one variable.
This is such a good example.
It's dynamic. It should be dynamic.
And in high school, think about it. What do you measure success with? It's about grades. But you can, if you just solely focus on grades, grades doesn't measure understanding. It can measure memorization.
That's why ChatGPT is so bad for school.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so you need to have a multivariable means of, okay, what does success look like? And it goes back to the point again. At the company that I'm in, I'm not sure if I should mention the name, or can I mention?
What company?
Yeah. So for example, at AEC, right? Initially, it was a normal.
Hierarchical.
It was in terms of how the AEC is a government-owned organization.
Yeah.
And so how we got paid was, it was a normal contract and whatnot. But then they found out, okay, that it was like, I think it was a cost plus contract. So I incur $100 million in terms of expenses. You slap on a profit margin, that's how we get paid. And what happens there? You incur more costs. Yeah. Now I incur 200 million and slap a phone. And so what happened then? The government got
It's
really
the same issue with the councils.
and what happened then? The government got really smart. They're like, okay, we'll move to a performance-based contract where now we measure multiple variables. We measure your expenses. So if you incur a lot of expenses, we'll give you a little bit more profit. We'll measure availability of the submarines. So the more available the submarines are, we'll give you, you know, this much extra. And so it measures multiple variables again. And so talking about CEOs and their performance and pays, I don't think it should be just restricted. They should be incentivized to work hard so that the company is profitable and whatnot, so that they then also get an incentive. Because again, they're there for their own interest, right? But it should be multiple variables. It's like if we talk about Optus, what would the government do in that situation? The government would then incentivize, okay, expenses, but availability of your infrastructure. That is another variable in which it can be measured. You know, they should introduce these things. And so they can potentially, the policy that you're talking about is that potentially there's redundancy, multiple infrastructure. It's like normal infrastructure, tower cells, but you also have satellite. So again, all of these policies, but also how do customers pay is for availability as well. Because cloud technology, I'm not sure if you know, cloud technology with SLAs, you know? So
What does SLA stand for?
Service level agreement, I believe it is. And so if you sign up on a cloud, if any, like for any period of time, if it drops, then what happens is that you'll get reimbursed for that. Yeah. So you don't actually pay. It's not like, okay, I'll pay you, I incur all of these things, my business shuts down, I don't care. It's like, okay, if any point in period, like the service cuts down, like by 10%, I pay you according to the agreement, I pay you this much, or I incentivize you this.
We'll do a reduction of the...
So again, it comes back to a mindset where the government in itself needs to come up with policies to enforce this kind of payment, styles of payment essentially. Because at AEC, it's the government, you know, the government pays us, they're the customers, you know. But again, going through society, it should be, you know, if I'm paying you for something, it's not just, okay, I'm paying you for one thing. It's measured across multiple areas, and that's how I pay you. And if one area falls down, I'll pay you less. So Optus could have been like, if Optus had that agreement, like the customer and Optus had that agreement, then you can measure availability as one of the things that you're paying for. You're not just paying for data. You're not paying for phone calls. You're paying availability of that. So if it's available for 24/7, you pay them for 24/7 of the period of the contract that applies.
Yeah.
But if it's less than that, I pay you half. Why would I pay for you for
No,
something
absolutely,
else?
because this huge thing happened. I guess Optus didn't have any financial.
Yeah, and they don't have any SLA on these kind of agreements, and the customer doesn't know. But like right now, there are other companies like AWS, Azure, Microsoft Azure that have the same thing. And because why there's so much competition now.
I guess the big difference with that is that those cloud companies, the customer is businesses, and generally not just just the average consumer. And so obviously, if a business is going through a contract, they have university educated people that like specialize specifically in this to make sure it's as free.
But again, that's what the conversation is, right? Like it's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
And so if this permeates throughout society and through governments, and everybody understands, okay, I can pay you according to various sort of agreements. I don't just pay you straight at the end of every month, and I get data. I'm not paying for data. I'm also paying for the availability of that data.
Yeah.
But this is not just Optus. This goes around schools, again, social policies, and so you
Houses.
everything like that.
Houses, because
Exactly.
I mean, talking about that concept, I mean, for me, being a Westpac, and it's literally how you explained it is the relationship we have with brokers. So, with a lot of the banks now, their majority of the business in terms of mortgages don't come from first party; they come from third party, because brokers manage the relationship between their clients and then they're referred over. And essentially, going into the incentivization thing is yes, we have our SLIs in terms of the days, how long we take to write the loan, but then brokers bringing the loan to us, they get a commission. They get an upfront commission that settle as soon as the loan settles. Within a month, they get paid their commission. It's about 0.75, I think, or 0.25 or something like that. So they get paid that. Now, for them to keep that commission, they have to convince the customer to stay with the bank 1 year, 2 years. Depends on the bank. They all have their clawback policies. Most banks are now doing, after 1 year, you keep your whole commission. Then the other thing is trail commission. From the interest that the customer pays, you get a commission of that every month. Which is why when you're a mortgage broker, the most important thing is not your initial settlement of the loan, it's your mortgage book, which is the trail commission that you get every single month from every single client that you have.
Yeah.
So that is where Westpac incentivizes the broker to keep the relationship strong.
To get the customer and to keep
And
them
to
as
maintain
well.
the customer.
Yeah, okay.
What if AI does that?
See, it's actually being... there is so many areas of the business that are getting AI implemented.
Yeah.
Right now, for me, credit assessment, where I view the customer's income, assets, liabilities, their risk rating, it needs a human sort of thought process because you need to think of a multitude of different areas. And then sometimes what happens is it could be outside of the policy. So it could be sitting in a grey area because the policy hasn't been refined perfectly. So then what I have to do is then write up a proposition, send it over to our higher delegate credit team, and then say, okay, the applicant is in this situation. This is, this is the risk. This is how we're going to be mitigating the risk. Can you approve it?
But
They'll look at
at the end of the day, isn't it just numbers? And so it can fall into different categories, but the groundwork, for example, like your job, can't that get automated by AI?
It has
Or a large portion of the roles and responsibilities.
There is a company that has done that, but it has to be so vanilla.
Yeah.
It has to be so vanilla for it to be able to be approved by the AI.
But the thing is with AI, what happens is that now the lifeblood of AI and how good your AI model depends on
the more
how
you put into it.
the amount of good data you put into it. And so the fact that you have data on hundreds and thousands of loans that have been approved and rejected, the millions of loans that have been accepted,
true.
and all you need to do is feed that into AI. The AI will know it.
But that's
Is
a
that-
risk as well.
Is there a sense of empathy in your role?
There is.
Yeah.
There has to be, because the thing is, there is certain times where a client will have a missed payment somewhere, or they'll have something, and then policy strictly says decline. If they have a missed payment here, decline. And if I run the decision, it'll decline it straight away.
Yeah.
Because what happens is I input things. When I run the decision, the system does the thinking. And then it will give me an output. Whereas what my job is then also is if there is that small variable that the system will instantly decline,
Yeah.
and I think about it, I go back to the broker. I say, look, have a chat with the customer. Why did they miss the payment? All right. They have a liability here. Why can't they close it? And just a plethora of different things. Or if they're paying child support or something like that, then it comes back to me. Then I'll delegate with the broker to say, okay, let's build a strong enough proposition to give it to someone that has the delegation and tell them why it needs to be approved. Whereas if it was just AI,
Yeah.
it's black
Yes
and
and
white.
no.
It's yes, no. It's not actually. Yeah, I think if they do this, they can improve it as well. And that's where my role is important because 9 out of 10 times the brokers make mistakes.
I see.
So then instead of it's a catch-22 because the bank then has the BDMs, which is our business development managers, work with the brokers to educate them on our systems.
Yeah.
But then the other problem is the brokers don't work with just Westpac. They work with CBA. They work with NAB, Macquarie, ANZ, and everyone's policy is different.
Yeah.
You can't expect the broker to do
Yeah.
the work for 6
Correct.
different organisations.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
why we have credit assessors,
Yeah.
where
Makes sense.
they'll do about 80% of the work.
Mm.
They'll send it to me, and then I'll be like, you didn't do this properly.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And this is the bit of the policy that says this. And they'll go, oh, shit, I haven't sent things to Westpac in a while.
It's like that thing they say where, like self-driving cars won't properly work until all the cars on the road are self-driving.
But even then, I think, I mean, this is where my thought process comes in. I don't believe that AI can, anyhow, even the generative AI cannot replace humans.
No.
Because the way the technology works is that we need to upgrade our thinking as a society. Okay, so yes, the AI can learn something from the policies, and it has to be
It has
clean
black and
cut,
white. Yeah.
and then it gives you the answer. But to move forward, we need to keep updating the policies.
Yeah.
Whether it's banking, whether it's engineering, whether it's medicine, or any of those things, we need to come together as a society to make decisions.
Correct.
What's right and what's wrong.
Yes.
Okay, and how we can actually move forward.
Yeah.
And then the groundwork, the work that we cannot do to go to the next level, doing the complex of the solving the complexity of the systems is by humans, but they sort of like a day-to-day jobs that can a robot does it.
Yeah.
That's a robot's job because
Yeah.
we are not robots, and that's where I think one of the other discussions that we can actually dig down is that how AI will never ever replace humans.
Yeah. Because there was this there's this TV show The 100. I don't know if you watched it.
Oh, yep.
Heard of it.
There's a really good quote from there, and it was like, being a good leader is not knowing how to follow rules; it's knowing when to break them.
When
And an
correct.
AI will never break rules.
Correct.
It's like a really good example is like, it's like if you're at a uni course, and like I've done this before, where I'm at a uni course and I've worked really hard across the whole semester, and I calculated my grade at the end, and it's like an 84, but then I look at my transcripts at HD, and it's because the lecturer is like, I'm not going to give you a distinction. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, that's empathy. That's human. That's
Yes.
not a wrong thing, right? It's like,
But think about this another way, where I'm referring it back to that opposite issue.
Sure.
If we put everything into AI, invest everything into it, and it stops working.
yeah.
But we've gone so long without knowing
Yes.
how to do that job, without having enough information, without having the right people to know it. Okay, we could go, decades. We have to go quite a long time, and then just one day it stops working. You then have to train everyone up for
Yeah.
many, many years to then get even to the bare minimum
Yeah.
of what the AI was operating,
Yeah.
But what if we train people
alongside developing AI.
alongside of
Yeah.
developing AI?
I think that's the best
But
way.
also, when I was growing and I was still learning through all this, I come across things in the schools or universities that has no benefits. Like why am I learning this? Why am I just reading this? But I think the educational system needs to upgrade itself to adapt to what the skills, knowledge, thought process needs to be taught to the students, to the people. And I think we're going to be in the future, we're going to lifetime learners. Okay? What are we going to learn? How do we communicate? How we build teams? Because one person cannot hold the entire knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay? Then which comes back to how to build trust.
Yeah.
And that is the same issue with the housing, I believe. You know what I mean? Because we have not upgraded our policies in housing.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, but back to what you were saying about education. It was like, I know we were meant to talk about housing, but I don't think it was going to be.
I'm trying to bring it back to the point. I'm trying to respect you.
This has been a really good conversation.
It's not gonna go back to
let's talk about housing today.
Because I was like, cost of living, housing.
Everything but housing and the cost of living.
This is good. This is fine.
I'm afraid, the future topics, we invite a guest. We decide this time, and shit, that's what we talking about, mate.
So I think that's the beauty of it. It's like we're having that banter and we're able to just sort of bounce things off. No, it works well.
But, so I was thinking about, obviously, like what you said, what if things just stop working? I think more realistic than things to stop working is if you're no longer allowed to do it anymore, right? Because there has been, and I'm going to bring this up and you're like, whoa, it's so perfect, it's a great analogy. But there has been situations.
We'll be the judge of that.
There has been a specific situation I'm thinking of in the past where things have been going so well and so much progress was made in this specific field until all of a sudden policy changed and they had to stop. And you know what that was? Human trials for medicine.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Especially with the brain. Right? Because they even to this day, so much of the research and the background that people are using are from those experiments before the ethics got on board. Right? Because since that happened, it's been so hard to make new developments.
Well, it's because you can't use a mouse's genetic make to replicate a human.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then it reached a point where, regardless of how good the research was getting, we can't do this anymore. It's illegal. Yeah. So we could reach that point with AI where it's like, it's not that it's going to stop working. It's that all of a sudden we're going to get literally overnight. It's like, Australian policy passed. You are no longer allowed to use ChatGPT in Australia, and all the IPs block it. And if you get used to it, I mean, it's happened before. Like India, for example, TikTok's not allowed. That literally happened overnight.
Potentially,
no longer it doesn't let you get logged on.
US, that was politics, wasn't it?
US was also the same thing.
Politicians.
So it's there's no reason that it can't happen in Australia, in Australia with ChatGPT or in any other country. So it's it's not even just growing those roles at the same time. It's we have to, before we can grow ChatGPT or any other generative AI, we have to get policy from government saying this won't get banned. We have to have some kind of backing.
This is a very interesting topic because it's very interesting. I'll give you an example. Iran, for instance. This becomes a little bit political, but it's crossed with the technology. Almost all the social platforms are banned in Iran. Okay, you cannot have access to any of that. But guess what? I think the numbers that are coming, 14 million people run businesses through Instagram, even though
in Iran
it's banned.
Yeah. Okay.
Because somehow they get access to the VPN and they run their business.
Yes.
Okay. Something about 80% of the youth are using Instagram
Facebook,
in Iran
all these things.
because they somehow find a way to go around it. Okay. And I think this is why the social awareness works hands in hands with the policy, because yes, India, yes, America bans these things for a shorter time, and I understand and I respect that because TikTok breaches the data, all of that. But I think it's important that the society gets to the awareness of how dangerous these things can be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Deepfakes, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scary.
politicians, yeah.
And works around it, because you can't ban these things
Yeah, because people will
for
just
long,
use it, right?
because people just becomes more greedy about it.
It's human nature.
It's human nature.
When you and it's like referring it to, say you have a child, right? If you tell your child don't do this, they'll be more inclined to do it. Whereas, all right, don't go there because you're gonna fall. They'll go there, they'll fall, they'll learn the lesson, and then they'll.
Yeah.
Whereas if you slowly, it's like you don't become a helicopter parent. You don't just cut it off straight away.
Yeah.
You're like, you can fall down a couple of times, and then you'll learn it yourself. So it's like, I think going into it, I think it was very bad for Iran to just cut it off straight away. I think have monitor it, but then still allow them to access it. So then you're able to keep an eye out on what's going on, but then not fully think. I think, and that's where, like China, they, instead of having the social media platforms that are controlled externally, they have Taobao and they have WeChat and they have all of that. Whereas they control the fundamentals of it, but then they still allow their residents to have some sort of thought of.
But look, I mean, when it comes to the decision about TikTok, I think it was the right decision, because because if it was, it's a free trade type of things. If China bans everything else, we have to ban everything from China. Yeah. So that's I think that's ideal. But for something like AI that is generated in the US, you know, and we are developing these things across, you know, the West, I don't think that's ever gonna happen.
Look.
I hope not.
No, I hope not. I hope not too.
Yeah.
But I don't see it as impossible for
But then
a
again,
government to realize.
but there's a hazard and there's a likelihood, you know, that turns into a risk. So there is the potential hazard,
of course.
But what is the likelihood of that occurring?
No, okay.
Especially if.
But what is the risk though? The risk is that AI, the risk is that AI will develop and we're gonna foresee a path where AI is gonna develop so much that people are gonna lose their jobs, which is we already know that's gonna happen, or like new jobs will be created, but the government will foresee that the jobs are gonna get lost at a rate so much faster than new jobs are created that we don't have anything to do with people. So the path of least resistance and the best thing that they can foresee to happen is to temporarily ban AI until they can figure out what to do. Like, that doesn't seem impossible to me.
But the other thing
right
is,
now,
like a chicken and egg, though.
There's
It's
no
like a
restrictions. Like what you said about standards.
Yeah.
Australia is not investing in standards,
No.
right? But with every other case, like electricity, for example, electrical standards, AS3000, or automotive, the technology moves slow enough that they can take a snapshot in time and then develop that standard.
Yeah.
With how I know how things move in government in Australia, it's so slow. By the time they try to develop a standard, everything will already be different. It's like unless you
government changes.
Exactly.
So one government has one policy.
Yes.
4 years later, the next government completely changes.
So
and then they start fresh. They have their own agenda they want to push.
I mean, when when Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan talking about AI, this was all Elon could talk about. It's like, we need a governing body for AI to kind of oversee it.
And I feel like it has to be a delegate from majority of the countries that use it, because then it falls down to, and it's going to be a horrible analogy, the US dollar. Think about AI. If everyone is using it, but one person controls it, then you shut it off to the person that's not cooperating. And that's the same goes with US dollars is, all right, so Australia's not cooperating. You don't get no US dollars. US dollars runs the whole the world. So then US dollars is used to buy oil, is used to buy
reserve
grain,
currency,
everything. So if you don't have enough of that US dollars, then you can't buy things because your currency is worth shit.
Yeah.
And I think the same sort of thing goes with AI, is if the US manages everything, if then it gets to the stage where they're like, all right, everyone's relying on it, you're not cooperating, I cut you off.
Exactly. Or if we go back to what you were saying with the monopoly, And I mean, we already have it, like a monopoly of an AI model, right?
Exactly.
Like
AI,
the actual
yeah.
GPT-4 engine, if we get a monopoly of the actual
Yeah.
AI that's getting all the input data,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like the rich gets richer and poor gets poorer. If AI is run on data, the best one will get the most data.
But what if
because everyone will use it.
what if developing an AI model and running it becomes so cheap? Which is happening already.
Yeah.
Like we are 6 months down,
Yeah.
like 8 months down the track of ChatGPT. When it first came in, everyone was like, "Oh, what will happen?" But how many jobs actually been lost so far?
Not a lot.
No,
I think-
yeah.
You know, and this is where it becomes very interesting, because I think the fear of AI replacing those things, it's decreasing, because now everyone is like, for instance, I know, for instance, my cousin works for a construction industry, okay, and he had the struggles with data gathering, and because at the same time he had to send just like 20 emails per hour or something like that. With ChatGPT, he could do it in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, all of that, and then no pay cuts, nothing. But the fact is, he found time to spend more with his daughter.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so suddenly you're shifting that.
Yes.
And I think this is gonna happen gradually through the entire society, because then every industry adopts it, everyone adopts it, everyone knows to learn about it, and then the next generation after us, probably they will be sort of, if we know how AI works and how we can develop it, all of them probably knows how to code and how to develop that. And by the way, the new new programming languages are coming up, new models are coming up. So it's constantly evolving. So it's a different mindset. It's about changing those dimensions, as you miss.
I think AI in itself, as technically hard it is to develop the actual model, the most important thing is the data.
Yeah.
So you might have access to cheap AI models and whatnot, but you need to feed it data.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to business point, like the monopoly. It's not about the fact that it's ChatGPT and it can do
The data that it has access.
It's the access to the data and the monopoly of the data. And so countries may have developed their own models and whatnot, or like the AI interface and all of these things. But do they have access to the amount of data that ChatGPT owns? And because it becomes more richer, the more information and more data you have. Data is the bloodline of AI. AI without it is absolutely nothing. So you might have cheap AI models that you can code and whatnot, but it's useless if you don't have data. So it's the most. So countries right now, what they should focus is not necessarily on the AI. It's the data that AI uses and how it does that, and
Which Australia doesn't have any.
exactly. And so
Unfortunately, that is scary.
Yeah, and Australia needs to focus on how it can mine its data, and how to leverage that off, because then that goes back to Ali's point. Like, if the US has monopoly, not on the AI in itself, because the AI is it's a byproduct of the data. That's the thing. AI is just a tool in which it's a different paintbrush that you look at the data and how you can extract information out of it.
It's just a more efficient way of analyzing it.
And so the most important thing is, if the US has a monopoly of all of the data in the world and no one else has access to it, then it doesn't really matter if Australia has its own AI model or not.
Yeah.
Because you don't have access to the data. So your model is so rough that you're like, oh, okay. And the economies of scale is going to kick in, that ChatGPT is so much cheaper than, what you can develop. And so Australia and all the countries, in order to avoid a monopoly over AI, they need to start mining their own data. Whatever data they have, they need to store it. They need to be able to use it.
And not allow the US to.
The most important thing is the data.
Yeah. And with what we said about what kind of jobs it's like, and like no jobs yet, it's true there's like probably not a lot yet that has been, but I know already like what kind of jobs are going to go, and it's going to be the ones where you're following instructions and you don't have to ask. You can ask questions, but as long as there's someone to answer it, even if it's a complex task, like as long as you're following instructions and you have to follow a process, it's so easy.
Like your intuition.
Exactly, like a great example that's going to be gone. Like I see within the next 10 years, absolutely gone is like drafters for CAD, like CAD drafters. Like as an engineer, I develop. So obviously I'm a hardware engineer, right? So I develop like network infrastructure and diagrams and wiring and electronics and everything. So and then how it integrates into a facility. And so I essentially have to create the overall network structure, but I do that in whichever way I want. I could do it on a piece of paper. I could do it on like I use Microsoft Visio. I could do it on Paint, whatever I want, right? And then I give this to the drafter, and it's the drafter's job to take what I'm literally describing like image processing in GPT-4. Their job is literally to take my information and convert it to the Boeing template, right? And then send it back to me. And then I look at what they've given me and I go, okay, fix this, one more time. And I send it to my manager and it gets approved. That job is already taken.
So what is the key here? Is the key here
Look. Sorry, that job is not going to go.
No, but the people behind it.
But that's exactly what I'm saying.
Look, I get what you're trying to say.
So that job is going to be transformed to someone that, okay, you're going to do that job for yourself with the help of AI. So that person is going to be replaced by an engineer.
Yeah, I know that. But I'm talking about the people behind it, right?
Correct.
Like, for example, the drafter I'm working with, like, he used to be a mechanic, right? That's what he did when he was younger.
Yeah.
And he's worked as a mechanic his whole life, so he's dealt with a bit of CAD. And then he went to TAFE and he redid his, got a course in draftsmanship, and now he's like 40-something years old, 50-something years old. He's got a family, and this is like his final job, right? And so he's a drafter. When this goes, he's not gonna go back and train again.
No.
That job's gone.
His body will give out.
Exactly. So he's 50. Retirement age is like what, 60?
65?
Exactly.
Oh, it keeps growing.
It's gonna keep going up. So it's like, and like I get it for people that are young now, or like youngish that can re-career, but a lot of people in these specific jobs that you are just following instructions, you don't have to think a lot. They're like, it's towards the end of their career, like a lot of them.
So that's why it gradually will happen.
It will gradually happen, and so it's like.
So the question is how do you prevent from your job become? Yeah, of course you can, and the way in which you can is become a
Give
specialized.
an example as that job for that job if you were a drafter. How?
No, I'm saying that, for example, that guy. So you might not necessarily be able to maintain that job, right?
Yes.
But it's how do you then, for example, you can be a specialized drafter that you can design a specific thing that the model depends on data. So if the data is not there, and like if it does 80% of the work, but the 20% is still there, like you need a specialized drafter. And so, for example, if I take it back, if I go study nuclear engineering, there's no way that AI is going to do that because the data doesn't even exist first of all. And so the more I dig myself, eventually one day it will. But the more I dig, the more specialized it becomes. It's harder for a technology because think about it like from an economic point of view. Someone is going to design this model in the data, all of these things, unless it's like scaled or it's done in a super efficient and productive way. But if someone has to do like a custom job and be able to design an AI model based on what I do for one person, it won't make sense. The return on investment is like...
Look, we're going to do it differently. That's all about... look, say like... If you're looking at the drafters, the more dangerous things are the engineers and doctors, if you're looking at it that way.
Why?
Because the CAD softwares becoming so intelligent that actually can replace doctors and engineers.
But engineering
there's so much
does is not CAD.
Look, I mean, but then it becomes sort of like you don't need then 5 years of engineering degree or medical degree anymore. Okay, it becomes much shorter. Because it's an interactive between...
I don't think that's true. Because what I learned in engineering is not what I do now. I agree. But that goes back to what you were saying with if all technology is just shut down, I'll still be able to do my job because I have context. You know what I mean? And so it's like you can't train for only what the role is that you have to do in your everyday jobs because there's more to a job than that, and there's context.
That's how you transform through education, because the engineering degree tomorrow will be different from the engineering degree today.
And housing as well.
Exactly. Okay.
Sorry to cut you off.
That reminds me.
That's
It's 7:20,
Yeah,
and
perfect.
we should probably call it.
And an hour ago we went to talk about housing.
Yeah. So
That's why I brought it back, right?
Let's finish the chips, guys.
so next week we'll be talking about
Housing.
housing
Definitely.
and how technology will change that. That's exciting. I'm excited for that. That's what I researched for. So this is good.